Dear students, today we will be discussing about the research tools and techniques in data collection. I am Dr. Mouli, serving as professor in the Department of Education, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, Hyderabad. In today's program, let us discuss about the questionnaire, interview schedule, observation, rating scale, standardized tests, and also about the case study. A questionnaire is nothing but compilation of a set of statements or questions in order to elicit the response of the respondents. For example, let us take a topic like stress and adjustment problems in employees. I would like to study this problem, and for this I have developed a questionnaire. Firstly, we take the preliminary data like the name of the subject who is responding and the name of the employer, designation or cadre, and then the date of birth and age of the respondent. We should ask only those questions that are relevant. For example, at the beginning of the questionnaire itself, we declare that we have undertaken a study and the data that is collected is used only for research purposes and it will be kept confidential. So, therefore, it is preferable not to ask for the name because the identity will be revealed. Also, the respondents become more conscious of their responses. So, therefore, as far as possible, let us not ask those details that are not relevant and that reveal the identity of the respondent. Name of the employer, because we will be visiting different institutions, name of the employer may be collected, and designation or cadre, if we take into consideration the different cadres for our analysis, we should ask for that, and then date of birth and age. If at all we would like to compare different age groups, then we need the data. So, after the preliminary data starts the main questionnaire. We frame number of questions. For example, in your final form, if you want to have some 20 or 25 questions, then it is better you frame about 50 to 60 questions, because in the final form there will be some 20-25 items, whereas initially if you start with a large pool of questions, it is better to get quality questions in our questionnaire. For the topic that we have taken, here are some questions that are framed. Are your workplace problems resolved promptly? The respondent or the employee would say yes or no. Are you comfortable with the work environment? Yes or no. Like this, several questions are framed that are related to stress and adjustment of the employees. Do you feel you are overburdened with work? It is with a purpose that we have introduced all these questions. This is to test whether the individual is assertive in his communication or not. And similarly, every day do you have a sound sleep? Because a person who is overstressed may not be in a position to have good sound sleep. Similarly, nowadays diabetes has become very common and they say it is stress related. So, the question is, do you have diabetes or blood pressure? So, for these questions the respondent would say yes or no. And then similarly, time management is very important in order to reduce stress. Therefore, a question, have you ever said, I have no time, which means the person does not know time management. He does not know how to adjust, how to allocate the time for various activities that he is undertaking. Naturally, when he is not able to accommodate the various activities that he has to do, then it is quite possible that very often he might say, I have no time. Similarly, there is lot of competition that is building up both in employment and also in studies. So, a question like, in your view, you are the best, which means all of us, we are competing to be the best. But the thing is, this competition should not turn unhealthy. Healthy competition is always encouraged and always we want to be the best. Whereas nowadays in studies, there is lot of unhealthy competition that is being developed in our classroom situation. So, like this, a number of questions are asked. For example, a person who is stressed is likely to take up smoking or might get addicted to alcohol. They think these things relieve them from stress, but this is a false notion. In order to reduce stress, they have to get involved in various hobbies like gardening, singing, dancing, jogging and things like that. Whereas, becoming an addict to alcohol or taking up smoking, these are not going to provide them relief. And like this, several questions are framed. Sometimes the questions may not be so simple, it may be necessary to do some further probing, like, are you happy with the organization you are working with? For this question, the individual might say yes or no. So, the second question, that is the question following this is, if no, what did you want to be? A person is not happy, he says he is not happy. So, we want to know why he is not happy. So, it may be necessary to branch out questions like this. Like this, set of questions or statements form a questionnaire. We start with a raw crude form and we finalize it and we get about 20-25 questions depending on the audience, depending on the subjects that we have identified. If it is school children, the length of the questionnaire should be reasonably short, whereas for grown ups and for employees it can be relatively longer. So, the size of the questionnaire is determined on the nature of the audience. The second method is interview method. In this method, there is a face to face dialogue between the interviewer and the interviewee. This is an opportunity for the interviewer to interview, and wherever necessary he can as well insert, he can as well ask those questions and elicit responses that he is looking for. In fact, good interviewers are able to establish good rapport. A social relationship with the interview that encourages trust and sharing of personal information is very much important. When we look at the nature of interview, it can be a structured or unstructured interview. In case of a structured interview, the interviewer goes to the field with a structured interview schedule. That means, a set of questions that he is going to ask all the respondents and then make a note of the responses that are given. So, the interviewer follows a rigid procedure asking questions in a form or order that is prescribed. Interviews can be classified as structured and unstructured. In case of structured interviews, predetermined set of questions are posed to the interviewee. The interviewer follows a rigid procedure asking questions in a form and order that is predetermined. In case of unstructured interviews, these are very flexible and the interviewer has the flexibility to pose questions according to the responses that he receives from the interview. So, they demand deeper knowledge and skills on the part of the interviewer. When we look at the advantages of the interview method, more information can be drawn from the interview. It is easy to establish rapport with the interview, and there is greater flexibility under this method. And when we look at the limitations of the method, it is very expensive because it has to be one-to-one, and it is time consuming, and there can be bias on the part of the interviewer. For the success of this method, the interviewer should be thoroughly trained in methods, and they should be carefully selected, and briefing should be given to them. Sometimes telephonic interviews can also take place. These interviews can save lot of time. The same set of questions is posed to the interview, and over telephone information can be gathered. The next tool that we can employ in social sciences and education is observation method. Researchers, especially in psychology, use observation as a scientific tool to learn about behavior, but they use it in a planned, precise and systematic manner. They use observational techniques to measure behavior as it occurs. Direct observation with a naked eye. That means, if you want to observe children in a natural setting, in their classroom or in the playground, you go there and observe. This is what we call direct observation. It can be participant observation or non-participant observation. For example, along with children who are playing, if you take part, then that becomes participant observation. Otherwise, using some technical devices like video recording or using one-way mirrors, you can observe being a non-participant observer. So, here certain technical devices can be used for recording and replay. In case of anecdotal records, soon after the occurrence, the individual makes recording or observational notes about something that has struck the observer. There can also be running record, wherein as the incident takes place, the individual can write down each and every dialogue and action that he has observed. In case of unstructured observation, you make note of all the things that are happening. In case of structured methods, you will have something like a checklist, wherein you make a note of the various things that have taken place during observation. Similarly, naturalistic observation is when you observe individuals in their natural setting. For example, when students are in the classroom or when the students are in the playground, you do not disturb the setting, but in the natural setting you observe them. And sometimes it may be necessary to create a situation and you place them under that observation. When it comes to the advantages of natural observation are, it is easy to collect data and no special arrangements or tools are required, and the aim of psychology is to understand and predict behavior in life situations, and observation method gives the scope to study the behavior in life situations. That is why it is mostly used in psychology. When we look at the disadvantages, some aspects of behavior are implicit and they may not be explicit. So, feelings and others internal processes are very difficult to be observed. It is very difficult to convert data from natural observation into quantitative terms. It is mostly qualitative in nature. Many instances of behavior do not repeat themselves. So, it is very difficult to record and replay some of these things. When we look at the rating scale as a research tool, here for various statements the respondent would indicate his rating regarding the occurrence of a particular incident. For example, here on this rating scale, 0 means did not apply to me at all, 1 means applied to me to some degree or some of the time, 2 means applied to me to a considerable degree or a good part of time, 3 means applied to me very much or most of the time. The respondent has to say, in the past 1 week, if he has experienced the things that we are going to ask for, how frequently. For example, I was aware of the dryness of mouth. He has to say, in the past 1 week, is it very frequently or very rarely, depending on the response, that is 0, 1, 2, 3, we can make out how frequently he has done that. And similarly, I could not seem to experience any positive feelings at all. For the statement, he has to indicate how frequently he experienced such a type of situation. I experienced trembling in the hands. So, he has to say whether he has experienced it more frequently or less frequently. So, depending on the responses, that means he is actually doing rating. And using the questionnaire, we can also develop a Likert type of scale, wherein the respondent would say whether he strongly agrees or strongly disagrees with the statement that is given. So, this is a continuum from strongly agree to strongly disagree. In between is a state what is called can't say or don't know. The respondent is encouraged to say yes or no, that is agree or disagree, but where it is not possible he may mark it as can't say or don't know. So, for the various statements he would indicate the degree of agreement or disagreement with the statement. And when it comes to the standardized tests, a standardized test is a test that is administered and scored in a consistent or standard manner. That means, in order to be called, rokna hai? When we look at the standardized test, a standardized test is a test that is administered and scored in a consistent or standard manner. A standardized test is designed in such a way that questions, conditions for administering, scoring procedures and interpretations are consistent and administered and scored in a predetermined standard manner. When these standardized tests are norm referenced, it means the performance of the individual is compared to the norms that are developed by the test developer. A test developer, when he develops a test, it is administered to a large sample, and based upon the responses he develops the norms tables. So, we compare the performance, the present performance with that of the norms that are developed, and then we call it a norm reference test. Similarly, we have the Criterion-Referenced Test. This is a style of test which uses test scores to test whether or not test takers performed well on a given task, not how well they performed compared to other test takers. That means, we are not going to compare with other test takers, but on the particular test that is conducted by the teacher, we just arrive at the conclusions. A standardized test is supposed to have validity and reliability. These are the typically viewed as essential elements for determining the quality of any standardized test. A test validity is the extent to which a test, such as a scholastic test, accurately measures what it is supposed to measure. Validity can be face validity, that means just by having a look at the test, whether the test would be in a position to measure the particular trait or not can be determined. That is what we call face validity. And then construct validity, it is based upon a construct. We develop a test, and as long as the test seems to measure the particular construct, it is said to have construct validity. We have criterion related validity that is used to predict future or current performance, and it correlates test results with another criterion of interest. Content validity, a test is supposed to have content, that is, it should cover the various aspects and the entire domain. So, when we give it to the experts, they would be in a position to say whether the test has content validity or not. The second dimension, that is reliability, is the degree to which an assessment tool produces stable and consistent results. That is, when a test is repeated, it should produce more or less the same results. The first one is what is called test retest reliability, wherein to a set of students you administer a test now, and after a gap of 1 week or 1 month you repeat the test. You once again administer the test and you compare the performance of the subjects on these two tests. We have parallel forms reliability, wherein two parallel forms are developed and both versions must contain items that probe the same construct, skill, knowledge base, etc., and to the same group of individuals you will administer both the forms, that is the parallel forms. The scores from the two versions can then be correlated in order to evaluate the consistency of results across alternate versions. Inter-rater reliability. When number of raters do the rating, it is quite possible that some raters may be very lenient and some others very strict. Therefore, inter-rater reliability is useful because human observers will not necessarily interpret answers in the same way, and raters may disagree as to how well certain responses or material demonstrate knowledge of the construct or skill being assessed. So, we correlate the raters here, and we have the split half reliability. A test is constructed and it is to establish internal consistency. We do splitting, that is, for example, even numbers become one form and odd numbers become another form. That means, the same questionnaire is split into two halves, and we try to establish the correlation between these two sets, that is what we call split half reliability. Lastly, let us discuss about the case study method. The case may be an individual, an institution, or an incident that has occurred. So, case study is directed to study an individual behavior or a single unit called a case. Here, the researcher tries to learn everything they can about the individual. They study about the individual, they talk to the friends, colleagues, neighbors, gather information from all the sources possible, and all this is in order to gain in-depth knowledge of the individual. Clinical psychologists use this case study method when they are studying their ill patients, mentally ill patients, wherein they gather information that is supported by medical and psychological investigations as well. When we look at the advantages of this case study method, tremendous amount of data can be collected this way, and though it is time consuming, a significant understanding can be gained about the client's functioning. Knowing the subject's background helps the psychologist understand the influences and forces that shape the subject's development. A case study can be a rich source of hypothesis for future research, and a case study can be used carefully, can help us to get lot of insight into the nature of the different kinds of behavior. It also has certain disadvantages, like people are unique and have too many complicating factors in their lives to be that predictable. So, what researchers find in one case won't necessarily apply or generalize to others. In case of research, we wish to draw certain generalizations which is not possible in case of case study method. And case study might result in distortions of events or oversights, and a large amount of data has to be collected from many individuals. Some of the things due to oversight may not be noticed by the individual, and it is time and effort consuming. So far we have been discussing about the various research tools and techniques that we can employ in data collection, especially in social sciences and education. I hope when you do research, you will keep these things in mind and use appropriate research tools and techniques for conducting your study. So, thank you.